Have you ever felt a sense of déjà vu? That feeling you've been here before, that strange moment when everything seems familiar, like you're watching a movie you've already seen. Well, what if I told you the entire global economy is experiencing that right now? We're looking at a market that seems unstoppable, reaching new highs almost every day. Record after record is falling. Investors are euphoric. It feels great, right? Everyone's portfolio is up, optimism is everywhere, confidence is soaring. But this isn't the first time we've been on this ride. The last time things looked this good, the last time the champagne was flowing this freely was in 1929, right before the world plunged into the Great Depression. History doesn't repeat itself, they say, but it sure does rhyme. And right now the rhymes are getting louder. The same warning signs that flashed red before the biggest economic meltdown in modern history are blinking again. We're seeing patterns that should make anyone who knows their history nervous. The red flags are there if you know where to look. And the scary part? It seems like most people are either ignoring them or just don't see them. They're too caught up in the moment, too focused on their gains, too confident that this time is different. This time we're told the fundamentals are stronger, the technology is better, the regulations are in place. But that's exactly what they said in 1929. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the shocking parallels between the Roaring Twenties and today. We'll explore how a toxic cocktail of soaring debt, wild speculation, and unchecked corporate greed is setting the stage for a potential sequel nobody asked for. Let's travel back to the 1920s. It was an era of unprecedented prosperity, jazz music, and flapper dresses. The economy was booming like never before. New technologies like the automobile and radio were transforming everyday life, creating millionaires overnight. The stock market was the talk of the town, and it seemed like everyone was getting rich. Your neighbor, your barber, the guy selling newspapers on the corner, they were all talking about their stock picks. Shoeshine boys were giving investment advice. People were borrowing money like never before to buy stocks, a practice called buying on margin. You could put down just 10% of a stock's value and borrow the rest from your broker. It was leverage on steroids. It was a party that seemed like it would never end. Sound familiar? Today we have easy access to credit, meme stocks, and a get-rich-quick mentality fueled by social media. Apps make trading as simple as ordering food. You can get approved for a margin account in minutes. No financial advisor needed. No real understanding of what you're buying required. Reddit forums and Twitter threads are the new stock tips passed around at dinner parties. People are betting on companies they barely understand because someone online said it's going to the moon. Cryptocurrencies promise instant wealth. Day trading has become a hobby for millions. The tools are different, but the human behavior is identical, a widespread belief that the market can only go up. The same optimism, the same certainty that we've entered a new era where the old rules no longer apply, the same conviction that this time really is different. Back in the 20s, a huge wealth gap was forming. While industrial production soared, wages for the average worker barely budged. Factories were churning out products at record levels, assembly lines were humming, but the people working the assembly lines weren't seeing their paychecks grow. Productivity was up, but compensation was flat. All the profits were flowing to the top, creating a fragile, top-heavy economy. Corporate profits were skyrocketing, but this wealth wasn't trickling down. Instead, it was being funneled back into more stock market speculation, pushing prices to unsustainable levels. The rich were getting richer, pouring their gains back into the market, creating a feedback loop that looked impressive on paper, but had no solid foundation. It was a house of cards built on the assumption that consumption could keep pace with production. But how could it when the consumers had no money? Today we see a similar story. Corporate profits are at record highs, and CEO compensation is through the roof, while many families struggle to keep up with the rising cost of living. Middle-class wages have stagnated when adjusted for inflation. The gap between executive pay and worker pay has grown from 20 to 1 in the 1960s to over 300 to 1 today. Housing costs have skyrocketed. Healthcare, education, basic necessities, they're eating up more of the average paycheck than ever before. People are working longer hours for less buying power. This inequality isn't just a social issue, it's an economic vulnerability. When too much wealth is concentrated in too few hands, the entire system becomes unstable. The economy depends on people spending money, on a healthy middle class with disposable income. But if most people don't have money to spend, that engine starts to sputter. You can't have a consumer economy without consumers who can afford to consume. Another key factor in 1929 was the lack of regulation. Banks were playing fast and loose with people's money, and there were few rules to stop them. They made risky investments and got caught up in the speculative frenzy. They were both the casino and the gambler at the same time. They took deposits meant to be safe and bet them on the market. When the crash came, they didn't just lose their own money, they lost their customers' life savings. People who thought their deposits were safe, who trusted the system, discovered the vaults were empty. After the crash, new laws like the Glass-Steagall Act were put in place to prevent this from happening again. These regulations separated commercial banking from investment banking, creating a firewall to protect ordinary depositors. The government established the FDIC to ensure deposits. Rules were written to prevent the worst abuses. But over the decades, many of those protections have been weakened or removed entirely, all in the name of financial innovation and free markets. Lobbyists argued that the regulations were outdated, that they were holding back growth and competitiveness. The financial industry claimed it could regulate itself. Glass-Steagall was repealed in 1999. Other safeguards were gradually stripped away. Deregulation became the watchword. This has allowed a new era of complex financial products and risky behaviors to flourish, echoing the very environment that led to the 1929 collapse. We've got derivatives, credit default swaps, leveraged buyouts, instruments so complicated that even the people trading them sometimes don't fully understand the risk. The financial system has become a labyrinth of interconnected bets, and nobody really knows what happens if one big player falls. So what finally popped the bubble in 1929? It wasn't one single thing. It was a series of events. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates to cool down the speculation, which made borrowing more expensive. Suddenly, those margin loans that seemed so cheap weren't looking as attractive. At the same time, a few big-shot investors started quietly selling off their stocks, sensing the party was over. These were the smart money players, the ones who had seen bubbles before. They knew when to walk away from the table. Fear began to creep in. Whispers turned into rumors. Rumors turned into concern. Concern turned into panic. Then came Black Thursday, October 24th, and the following week, Black Tuesday, October 29th, when the market completely collapsed. Panic selling took over. Everyone rushed for the exits at once, but there were no buyers. It's like a crowded theater when someone yells fire. In the stampede, people get crushed. Fortunes built over a decade were wiped out in a matter of hours. Millionaires became paupers before lunch. Investors who woke up rich went to bed broke. The ticker tape, which recorded stock prices, couldn't even keep up with how fast values were falling. By the time the tape caught up, the prices had fallen even further. The aftermath was catastrophic. The stock market crash didn't just stay on Wall Street, it triggered a domino effect across the entire economy. As people lost their savings, they stopped spending. When people stopped spending, businesses couldn't sell their products. Inventory piled up in warehouses. Store windows that once displayed luxury goods now displayed going out of business signs. So they laid off workers. As unemployment skyrocketed, even more people stopped spending. It became a vicious cycle, feeding on itself. Each layoff meant less spending. Less spending meant more layoffs. Banks, which had gambled away their deposits, started to fail by the thousands. Over 9,000 banks collapsed during the Great Depression. People lined up for blocks trying to get their money, only to find the vaults were empty. Families lost everything. Not just their investments, but their basic savings, the money they needed to buy food and pay rent. Life savings accumulated over decades vanished overnight. This cycle of fear and economic contraction was the start of the Great Depression, a decade of hardship that affected millions around the world. Unemployment hit 25% in the United States. 1 in 4 workers had no job. People lived in shantytowns called Hoovervilles, named bitterly after President Hoover. Soup kitchens became a daily reality. Bread lines stretched for blocks. It was a wound that took a world war to finally heal. Now let's bring it back to today. We see central banks around the world grappling with inflation. using interest rate hikes as their primary weapon, the same tool the Fed used in 1929. They're trying to cool down an overheated economy without triggering a recession. It's a delicate balancing act, walking a tightrope with no safety net, and history shows us how easily it can go wrong. We see incredible hype around certain sectors like AI and tech, drawing parallels to the radio and automobile stocks of the 20s. Everyone wants to invest in the next big thing. Everyone wants to be early. Valuations that would have seemed insane a few years ago are now considered normal. Companies with no profits are worth billions because of what they might do someday. We're betting on the future, not the present. We see a global economy interconnected like never before, meaning a crisis in one major country could spread like wildfire. Back in 1929, it took weeks for the panic to spread across oceans. Now it happens in milliseconds. A bank failure in one country can trigger a cascade across continents before most people even wake up. Supply chains are so intertwined that a disruption anywhere can ripple everywhere. We learned this during the pandemic. One factory closing in Asia can empty shelves in America. Why are so many experts so calm? Why is there so little concern among the people who should know better? It might be what psychologists call normalcy bias. The belief that because things have been fine so far, they'll continue to be fine. It's the refusal to believe a disaster could happen, even when the warning signs are clear. We've been rescued so many times by central banks and government intervention that people assume there will always be a safety net. There will always be a bailout. There will always be someone to step in and stop the fall. This isn't about predicting a crash on a specific date. No one can do that. Anyone who claims they can is either lying or deluded. Markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, as the saying goes. This is about understanding risk and recognizing patterns. The lessons from 1929 are not just a history lesson. They are a user manual for our current economic environment. They teach us about the dangers of herd mentality, the instability caused by massive inequality, and the critical need for sensible regulation. When everyone is thinking the same way, when everyone is making the same bets, that's when the system is most vulnerable. Crowded trades are dangerous trades. The story of 1929 is a powerful reminder that trees don't grow to the sky, and financial markets are driven by human emotions, fear and greed, just as much as by fundamentals. You can have all the fancy algorithms and trading models you want, but at the end of the day, markets are about people making decisions. And people get scared. People panic. People follow the crowd right off the cliff. We like to think we're rational, that we're different, that we'll see it coming. But history shows that most people don't. So, what can we do? We can't single-handedly stop a global economic shift, but we can be informed. We can learn from the past to make smarter decisions about our own finances. We can diversify our investments across different asset classes. We can avoid taking on excessive debt, especially to fund speculative investments. We can build an emergency fund that can carry us through hard times. We can question the narrative that everything is always going to be okay. We can be the person who asks the uncomfortable questions when everyone else is celebrating. It's about being prepared, not paranoid. There's a difference between fear and prudence. Fear paralyzes. Prudence protects. By understanding the causes and consequences of the 1929 crash, we arm ourselves with the most valuable asset of all, knowledge. Because the best way to avoid repeating history's mistakes is to first understand how they were made. The people who survived 1929 financially intact weren't the ones who predicted the exact day of the crash. They were the ones who understood the underlying fragility and positioned themselves accordingly. They weren't the smartest or the luckiest. They were simply the most cautious when everyone else was being reckless. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most critical financial moments. If you found this information valuable and want to learn more about how historical events shape our world today, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Stay curious, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.